Yes. Thank you. So this, that means we're supposed to behave. With listening, that means we're supposed to behave. Oh.
You all right? All right.
I'm gonna tell you, let's no, that's how we do it. Something every day. It's like drink more water. I'm like, I'm a river, and I still, I got in the last month. That's how. There's my hands. I get a cup of soup from water.
Yeah, what you want? Water, juice, whatever you want.
They said, let them know. Even fix your card, so that's saying up. It's so soft down and.
All right, how's everybody doing? All right, we want to thank you for attending our listening session of the Equity Advisory Board. We have some food provided by Dr. Dr. Houghton. That's over here to my right, and you all are welcome to go and get some food. There's some drinks in the refrigerator. And we call this meeting to order at 6:00 p.m. All right. Today we've come to have a listening session. The Board of County Commission, we were appointed, the members up here were appointed to serve over what's called the Equity Advisory Board. And with that board, what we're doing right now for the first year, we've received presentations from each of the departments with the county. And we still have we still probably have about maybe four or so more presentations that we have to receive. And then we also want to hear from the community. And what we're going to do, we have an audit tool that was developed. And then we're going to look at each department and ensure that they line up with equity in our county. And so we've been hearing from all the departments, but it's also extremely important that we hear from the community. And so today, when we say listening session, it's not you all listening to us. It's us listening to you all. You all experience the county. You all deal with different departments. You deal with the work that the county does here in Alachua County. And so we want to hear from you all so that when we go, what we have is there's a comprehensive plan. And the comprehensive plan that we're using now, the county is using now, is from 2019 to 2040. We have an opportunity to modify that comprehensive plan. Comprehensive plan is basically a Bible for the government. And when they go and make decisions on what road to pave, whatever they're doing, they have to go back and refer and make sure that it fits their comprehensive plan, so they're not all over the place. And so with a tool that important, we want to also make sure that equity is involved in that tool when they're making their decisions. And so we have our board up here. I'm Ron Rawls. I'm the chair of the board.
Yvette Carter, citizen at large.
Elena Lawson Bennett, citizen at large.
Frank White, and I'm an alternate.
Nancy Dean, citizen at large.
All right, wonderful. And so the first thing that we want to do is, board, you all have the agenda that's before you, and I'm going to ask for a motion to approve the agenda.
Sir. Chair. Sir Chair. I move that we approve the agenda as printed. Second.
Motion been made and properly seconded. Is there any discussion? All in favor, let it be known by saying aye. All opposed, nay. Ayes have it. Motion carries. Thank you so much. Amen. I'm saying amen like I'm in church, but I am in church. You want to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Jerry Crawford. Sorry, I'm late.
All right. So another thing too. So when you talk, most time when you're in a space like this, people say, I don't need a microphone. My voice carries. Well, your voice might not carry to the people that's watching online. And so when you come up to make any kind of comments or say anything you want to say, we want you to come to the podium, and that way that the people online are able to hear you clearly. All right. And so we've already passed the agenda. Now, for our listening session, one thing that we're going to do when we were in one of our meetings, and this group right here pays very close attention. And so in one of our meetings, we heard something mentioned that now I can understand if I didn't know about it, because I've only been back here pastoring. This is my 5th year. But these people right here, they know the workings of the county. And it was mentioned in one of our meetings about enterprise zone that's out here. And we didn't have a whole lot of information on it. And so we wanted to, as we had this listening session, this enterprise zone that's over in Southeast Gainesville, we wanted a presentation about what that is, so that if there's something that we need to make sure that we have close eyes on and we're taking advantage of in our community, as we look to develop our community. Our community don't have no problem developing on the west side, but for some strange reason, that same kind of development is not over here on the east side. And but that enterprise zone it perked our ears up. And so I'm going to ask Mr. Jeff Hayes if he'll come and do a presentation on zoning and the enterprise zone designation. And then once he does his presentation, we have on there member comments. But before I open my mouth, I don't know what you about y'all. I'd rather hear from them before I open my mouth. Yeah, we're here to listen. And so even though we have member comments after his presentation, Mr. Hayes, we're actually going to want to hear from you all. And it doesn't have to have anything to do with this presentation. If there's anything in the county that you all think that we need to be paying attention to, or that we need to know about as we look to tweak or modify, and we don't have the power to do it, but we can make a proposal to the board that we can modify the comprehensive plan. We need that information from you all. All right. Oh, yes, ma'am.
Mr. Chair, do we have the ability to ask questions throughout the presentation, or should we hold our questions to the end? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll wait for you to pull it up. You pretty much set the stage for what I was going to talk about, and I will keep it brief. I know this evening is for the public. So this is a precursor to some of the document like this. But we do future land use amendments. So where an amendment can be consistent with the other portions of the comprehensive plan, a future land use can be changed. We have a process to do that.
Thank you. So the second part, I was looking at the map, and I'm assuming y'all have done this. Has there been mapping done on the, the green spaces on the wetlands area? Have they been mapped against demographics of the community surrounding them? And, because historically, what was considered good land, which was buildable land, was not where African Americans were allowed to live. They were pushed out into the areas that we now call wetlands, and we protect them. And that makes, in some communities, more difficult to develop those areas. So I'm just wondering if there's been a demographic mapping done against the green spaces and wetlands. And also, there's this huge nature equity gap. So wetlands are not easy to have, community gatherings in and things like that. And I'm wondering if there has been discussion on how to ensure access to recreational spaces for communities living closer to wetlands. And by the way, I work for the Sierra Club. I'm very much for wetlands and protections for them, but we want to support communities that are affected by them.
Well, certainly, we're definitely, I can't point to an analysis that we've done recently in terms of a demographic analysis, but we're certainly aware of the legacy that you're speaking to, and that's absolutely true. In terms of access to natural areas and green areas, we're actually going through a bicycle and pedestrian planning update as we speak. That's looking specifically at, that's one of the issues it's looking at, as well as safety, but we're looking at access to our natural areas that the county and the state have preserved, and making sure we have, non-automotive means to access those areas.
Thank you. My last question, the fees that you talked about, being a layperson who's not in development, how big are these fees? That 50% reduction would be something that's considered that could drive economic development.
Yeah, and I don't want to overstate it. I would say for the application fees on a rezoning or a future land use amendment, that could be upwards of $7,000. So you're not saving that much money in terms of the entire development. So it might be $3,500 would be the reduction. The mobility fees are significant. So when I spoke to the county, we adopted new impact fees, and one of those was a much reduced mobility fee or a transportation impact fee on the east side of the county. That can be extremely significant depending on the type of development. So that gets into the hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars in some cases, depending on the size of the development. So that could be a serious incentive that may actually move the needle on development.
All right, we'll hear from my sister and then board member, sir.
Melvin Wilson, thank you. I have a couple of things that I want you to define for us so that we're all level setting. One is when you use things like high density or higher density, urban cluster, if we can use more layman's terms there. And then my question is specifically is related to something the mayor said a couple of days ago, is that there is plans to have things like a grocery store come to this side of town. Is that in the city or is that in the county? And if it's in the county, what is that going to mean for this side of the east side of town? And then maybe you all can too, as well as the development that's happening, and it may not be county specific because I'm not really sure where that line is. I know on the west side, it's like as soon as you cross the bridge, now it's county. I'm not sure where that is for this side of town. And what that development around Citizens Field and MOK Center is going to look like, and where those are in the comprehensive plan.
Yes. Great questions. The first one, in terms of density and defining terms, when we talk about high density in the county, which is the unincorporated area, we're usually talking the highest density we have in our comprehensive plan is 24 units per acre. So that's 24 dwelling units per acre. That's a typical
So apartment.
Multi-family apartments, yes.
Okay.
So very different in the city of Gainesville, where some of the development in the city of Gainesville is hundreds of dwelling units per acre. So there is a different scale that we recognize in the unincorporated areas appropriate versus inside cities. On all of the other things that you asked about, they basically are all within the city. Not that the county is not part of our policies or we're not working on them. One of the things we do at the county is coordinate and collaborate with the city on the community redevelopment area, so the CRA. So the project you spoke of around Citizens Field, that's being funded by the CRA. A lot of the funding for the CRA comes from the county, but is directed by the CRA, which is a city department. Yeah, community redevelopment area. Mhm. So, and similarly on the grocery store, most of the discussion about the grocery store have been within either the city controlled projects around GTEC and around the new emergency center, the new UF Health Emergency Center, and or across the street at the old Food Lion. But the county, certainly we have programs, and where there are opportunities to collaborate with the city, we do that.
I have a question. I have a question. You mentioned the reduction in fees and that this particular element has been on the book for 10 years. Knowing that it's probably you have not been impactful and however you are presenting this to the community, what is the plan moving forward to actually be proactive instead of reactive? I think you said that if someone comes to you and, let's say with a proposal or a plan or a development or what, you would say, oh, by the way, we can give you 50% off. How do you get ahead of that so that, people that may be interested in developing certain areas come in knowing that this is something that would possibly benefit them?
I think that's a great question. I mean, ultimately, it comes down to communications and us communicating out to the public and out to the development community. Often in government, we are criticized. We don't tell our story very well. So even when we have programs, we're probably not communicating them as well as we should. So that's something we're always trying to improve upon. I know I can speak for our current county commission. Community engagement and getting out at these types of events is critical. It's one of the major pushes we have for staff. So all I'll say is through this process, that's how we're looking to improve that. And I think, one note I'm going to take away from this is to advertise that more fully.
Here from board member Certain and then Dr. Houchin.
Thank you, Tina Certain. I had two questions. One, I was going to ask if you would just let us know, like how, if there's development coming and it's not something that may not be desirable, because some of those undesirable or zonings that allow a lot of use could be undesirable in the high density area and residential. So how can citizens give feedback, input on that before it gets to the approval stage at the board? That was one. But I wanted to, before you answer that, would you please go back, as I think it's important to answer what Ms. Wilson said about defining what the urban service or urban cluster is, or the urban service boundary is. I think that's really important for folks to know. Thank you.
And we could go back to the map if we want to pull it up, or I can describe it. So we have in our comprehensive plan, it's probably one of the founding principles of the comprehensive plan, is our urban cluster boundary. And so that is a boundary, as I mentioned, here on the east side, that
The first comment is, would it be possible for the scope that's written for the comprehensive plan recall to be reflective, whomever those consultants are, to be reflective of Alachua County's population? So that means that that would be about half of the consultants would be white and half those consultants would be people of color. That's the first thing that I would like to request. The second is, I'd like to request that there be mailing lists used for future listening events rather than just the county communication system. It seems like there's a lot of folks in this area who perhaps a church or other community organizations could have helped the listening. And I'm really repeating Dr. McNeely's comment there, so I hope that's okay. Here are my two questions. Why do wetlands deter development? And are there, this is one question in two parts, are there examples from other counties of sustainable housing, economic development, and health-related services in wetland areas that we could benefit from?
Okay, I'm thinking through that question. As usual, Dr. Houch brings a doozy. So, first of all, why are wetlands protected? Why do we have such protective policies? So, by and large, wetlands are sort of the kidneys of our water system. So we know in Florida that all of our water, primarily our drinking water, is coming from the aquifer. Wetlands are filtering that water, filtering through all of these wetlands and ending up in the sinkhole and to a snake in this area or in other sinkholes. So that's a primary reason. Also, developing in wetlands traditionally has been seen to have more problems with flooding. So the more you develop near and around wetlands, even though we have engineering and we have analysis that you can do to deal with the stormwater, traditionally we've seen that Mother Nature is best, and we have more problems with flooding when we don't allow the natural systems to take. To your second question, so that's why we have protective policies, and we do have very protective policies in Alachua County. We primarily do not allow impacts to wetlands, although we have in some cases where there's a public purpose, where the development can't take place. Otherwise, there's mitigation that can take place. There are impacts to wetlands that have been allowed in a very limited basis. I think your second question is probably a good one that I don't know a good answer to, that would be good one for us to research in this process, is to see if there's other communities that have been. Now, traditionally, we know in Florida, there's been lots of development in wetlands over many decades. I just can't point to any of those as being a positive, though the development's there. So clearly, maybe from an economic perspective, it may be. So I can't answer your second question.
Thank you. All right, last question is, would it be possible to use the bed tax and the Tourism and Economic Development Office to advertise those incentives and the fee reduction related to the enterprise zone in the eastern area of the county, as well as create perhaps a report and a plan for the community based on that?
I'm looking at our county attorneys in the audience, but because that is highly regulated how we use that bed tax. So it's a good question. Yeah, the bed tax is a tax that is put on whenever anyone comes into the community and books a hotel room. You pay an extra tax. Of course, if we go anywhere else in the state, we all pay it in those counties. So it's saying typically those funds are restricted to things that bring in tourism, we bring in heads and beds. So an example of one of the things we spent bed tax on is the sports and event center, and tourists and teams to travel here and spend nights in the hotels. So that's a good question. We can look into that. Primarily, I think we can do a better job with the communities that will take advantage of those discounts. I think we have a pretty good network and an availability to do a better job, even with the resources we have.
All right, the young lady that came up here, and then Ramona Jackson, and then Carla Blunt.
I just wanted to know
You,
that
you come up to the microphone.
your explanation about the infrastructure and the hesitation for that when it comes to the sewer line, is that the same case for the internet? For high speed?
That's a really good question. One of the things, not as much. In fact, we at the county and there has been some federal grants available that we're looking to extend high-speed internet pretty broadly out into the rural area and have a plan to do so. That type of infrastructure in terms of maintenance is many degrees of magnitude, orders of magnitude less expensive to maintain than something like a road or sewer line is. So once you get the fiber in the ground, it's not that hard to repair. So, and it's one of those, everyone needs to use it, you know, no matter where they live, just be a citizen of the grateful city.
Good evening. My voice is hoarse, so hopefully it can come out. So it's, the question that I have is, of course, we see all the building and all of the development that's going up on the west side, right? When you talk about the incentive to give people opportunities to build on the east side, are there other incentives outside of just reduction in application fees? Are there different incentives that's being offered for businesses to pop up on the west side that can actually be offered over here? Because it just seems like application fees, that's it. You know what I'm saying? So it's like if there's something that can be more compelling for a person to come, because as long as I've been here, we've talked about development on the east side and nothing has happened. And we talk about the different plans. I've been on steering committees and listening to all that. So it's like hearing you say the application fee and it goes up to $100,000 in comparison to what it may cost to develop. Is that going to be enough to make people say, okay, I want to come develop on the east side? That's my first question. And the second question is maybe premature. You're talking about residential possibilities being brought over here. Is there a factor when it comes down to affordable housing? We can have residential, but is it going to be to a point where it reaches those people to make it affordable for them to move into the residences that you're thinking about building?
All great questions, and I want to check in with the chair if you want to keep going with this format. I'll answer questions all night.
No, if they got questions, we want to hear.
All right, but you're just getting my answer. If anyone else has a better answer, please chime in. The first question was, are different incentives available on the west side? Why are we seeing development on the west side and not on the east side? Are there other incentives that are available? Not at the county level. So the mobility fee being the best example I have, whereas there's really a disincentive if you're just looking at dollars and cents to develop on the west side. But clearly there's the market is there. And I think, you know, Dr. Houchin's question about the environmental suitability and the other question about wetlands is paramount. If I had my other map where you could see where we have our wetlands mapped, it's very instructive. We're standing in a very wet area here, and not here, but surrounding. And it is more difficult to develop in wetlands. It's also more difficult even where it's not a wetland, so it's not defined as a wetland. The water table is this far under the ground. And so it makes it more difficult to develop. More of the property has to be set aside for stormwater, et cetera, et cetera. So there's not a county incentive other than maybe the disincentive about our wetland regulations there. So there's not a county incentive to develop on the west side. And your second question,
Affordable housing.
affordable housing. We're looking at affordable housing, sort of a two-track line, and that's a major element of what we're going to be have been reviewing forever. And then we've been more focused on it over the last year. We just did an inclusionary housing study at the county, and just last Tuesday, we're transmitting some policies to the state that are going to hopefully get more affordable housing. But from a staff perspective and a county perspective, we're looking at affordable housing from a two-track way. The first is that we just want to generally increase supply. So a lot of the policies that we've had, you know, this is just like any good, it's a supply and demand curve. You know, if there's lots of apples available, then apples are cheap. If there's not many apples available, then they're expensive. Same for housing. If there's not housing available, it's going to be expensive. So we look to increase supply. So get where we have regulations that we don't think add value, we try to reduce them. So we get more housing units available for more people. So that's one track. The other track is really targeted to actually provide affordable housing. So the citizens of the county voted in a surtax, and part of that sales tax is going to actually the county actively building or otherwise providing affordable housing that will be available to people who qualify for affordable housing. The other side is, as I mentioned, and has been working on, we've all been working on, is we've adopted inclusionary housing policies. And so what that gets to is the state has put up some roadblocks, but we're trying to jump over the hurdles. And wherever anyone proposes to increase the density on their future land use, one of the things we're going to be saying is if it's allowed, if it's compatible and meets our other policies, we will allow it, but a portion of those units are going to have to be affordable. So that's the policies we just transmitted to the state, or we're about to transmit to the state, but the board approved on Tuesday of this week.
Carlos Blunt, then Melvina Wilson.
Good evening. My question is regarding the roads and reconstruction in the east area. Where is it on the list of getting those things done? We literally have potholes. It doesn't seem like if there are any surveyors out that comes and check and see how the roads are looking. So that's my question. Where on the list of getting things done are the road reconstruction?
Well, if you have a specific road, after the meeting, I can look it up and actually tell you if it's on the list. So part of that infrastructure sales tax, a big part of it was road maintenance. And another big part of it, since we're here at the Equity Advisory Board, and Dr. Houchin could speak to, we got won awards, we got sessions on, is that we had an equity element to that. So it wasn't just looking at the condition of every road, but it was making sure that the money was not spent in one part of the community, that it was being spread around the community, and specifically being spent to communities that had historically been had disinvestment. So, and if you want to, I can, after the meeting, you can ask me about your specific road and I can look and see if it's on the list.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, like I said, road maintenance is extremely expensive, more than you could imagine. And that's why it really is difficult. This funding source has been a huge help, and the county's making strides, but it's still going to be a struggle for years to come until we can catch up.
That's looking already that someone that.
Hi, no, Tina would like to know, how can people influence undesirable decisions when an application comes to growth management? What can people do?
So that comprehensive plan that we put up, every zoning decision that's made, every future land use decision that's made, every site plan that's made, probably not every building permit, but everything else, every step before that. And that's where you can really, as a citizen or as a community, really have an input on an impact on what your community looks like. Every one of those decisions is made at a public hearing. And so the county takes testimony, so you can give written testimony, you can give in-person testimony, you can call and ask staff questions about proposed projects. And one of the, like, as I mentioned earlier, one of the goals of our county commission is actually to get out into the community and make sure people know when things are being proposed. So to that end, if you ever see an orange or a yellow sign driving down the road, that means something's proposed. And you get on your computer, we have a website that you can jump on. You don't have to pull over on the side of the road and try to read the signs. You can, and it'll give you some details. First of all, you can always just call our office. You just see any yellow sign. I was driving down 43rd Street and I saw a yellow sign. What's going on? And we will tell you how to get involved. So we've adopted a lot of tools in terms, made some real strides in terms of when you are interested in a project. And Jerry's a good example. Jerry was interested in a project in her community, and now we have lists, and she will be getting a notice anytime that anything around that project is going to happen. And so we have some tools that we've adopted, in the last 5 years that have really improved that, I think, more than it was. So yes, and those decisions, especially the comprehensive plan decisions, so this big comprehensive plan update that we're gonna be doing, and every one of those future land use map decisions, those are legislative decisions by your elected officials, and they answer to you, and we answer to them. So, yeah, it's great to be involved, and we try as a department to make sure that we have all the information available to the public.
Oh, I'm glad you brought up our experience. Just briefly though, when I saw, or my neighborhood, when we saw the orange and yellow signs going up, it was literally 90 days before an impact, major. So that can't be the deadline for someone to call and say, hey, what's going on? Because normally by that time, decisions have already been made. Folks have already had meetings with county staff. The community is literally the last one to know. So that still is, even though we have worked with the county to improve that process, and I do believe that you all have made strides, it's still flawed if we're using antiquated ways of communicating. I was just listening to a community project, and one of the city or county commissioners was basically being advised that, you know, there is so much, for example, junk mail that's going with everybody. So when you send something that does not look distinguishable to the layman in their community, it's just it could just be easily overlooked. And if you have connectivity issues in rural areas, you can't rely on using that method of advertisement. I'm just kind of just saying this. I know that you're working on making strides to make those changes, but by the time those signs go up, it's like almost too late, in my opinion.
And that's a good point. The only thing I'll say is typically one of the steps that we have in our county code is the requirement for really any significant development is to have a neighborhood workshop. And that happens before an application is already submitted. To your point, decisions have probably been made certainly on the developer side or on the property owner side that they don't come and even ask us questions until they've made a lot of their own decisions without that information. So it is difficult. And we also get a lot of questions about potential projects that never happen. So that's the other flip side of it is we don't want to dilute the time and resources of the community by, crying wolf every time there's any call about a piece of property, because we do get a lot of calls about projects that don't take place and don't move forward. But I to your point, yes, we're constantly trying to get at it.
Okay, everybody went, so I'm jumping back in. Hi, so first my question is, I'm gonna go with this one, I have three, I'm gonna tell y'all in advance. Since you just said that about why not make the developer responsible for contacting the community about potential impacts, and it's out on you guys, like that becomes a policy. You want to develop, you need to talk to that community about whether they want you there or not. I think that's not hard to do. Then two, how much partnership do you have with the city around development? Because again, I live on the west, and we got one at the mall. We got one right by the mall. How many apartments do we need? And why they got to all be over there? Then finally, have you all thought about to develop this side, putting something that would attract people here? That's all three coming together: tourism, county, and city, to put a hotel or something, a convention center over here by the airport, so that when people are coming in, they have a place to stay, and that will, in my opinion, organically build East Side development.
Those are all good questions, and let's see. First one.
Sorry.
No. Well, I'll start with the last one first. Yeah, so that has been a point of discussion about a major attractor, and I will say I think that is one of the discussions that's going on around the MLK Center, is to try to create an attractor, to create some community resources, to create something along those lines that will help, drive some of that demand for tourism, for economic development. As I mentioned, that's primarily the city of Gainesville, but certainly the counties.
But a convention center is different than a community center. It is a larger scale. You bring in organizations of mass size that bring the members, that bring the economic development in the finances. Because MLK is great, and I wanted to do that, but that's not the scale I'm thinking at all.
And it's been a while, probably since we've had a conversation about a convention center. I do know that we had some, and when we were having them in an amphitheater and primarily, being still closer to East Gainesville, but in downtown or thereabouts, so that we can, bring development and that sort of economic development closer to East Gainesville.
I want it close, I want it in.
Okay. Yeah, that is the hard thing. It is a really difficult conversation because it's a chicken and egg. The convention center or the attractor, and we had this conversation with the sports and event center, that they didn't want to build it unless the hotels were literally already there. That's, one reason it's a celebration point. So, but I understand your point. Go back to your other questions.
Developer around there?
What was your first question?
So the first one is about making sure that the developer
Oh,
takes
yeah.
on the onus of contacting the community that they're planning to develop in.
So that is actually the process. The first step is for the developer. One of the things we've taken to, especially for uses that, like waste related uses, utility related uses, like large scale utility uses, anything that has a sort of an environmental justice component. We've actually expanded that mailing boundary out to a half mile. It used to be 500 feet, then it was a quarter mile, now it's a half mile. So anyone who would have any direct impacts are being notified, and it is the developer's responsibility. Now, granted, we give them the mailing list, but that's just a functory process, but it's the developer's responsibility. They send out the mailers, they have a workshop, and really the whole idea is for them to come to a meeting room like this and meet with the community, so they don't bring an application to the county that doesn't have any community support, or is all community opposition. So
Does it go to the owner of the property or the resident of the property?
let's go to the owner of the property.
Okay, well, they're in South Florida.
That's true. Yeah, that's a valid comment. You got a second question?
Oh, so that one's about, maybe a moratorium on building, apartments in the west that coming this way with those apartments.
I will lay that. I'm gonna lay that one at the feet of the city of Gainesville. So,
I'll ask.
yeah.
All right, Dylan's mom.
Thank you. Good evening. I have a couple of questions as it relates to the hardwood project. I don't know how familiar everyone is with it. My first question is, was that a joint effort with the city?
No, it was in the fact that it's been funded by the community redevelopment area. So the city used county funds, but it was CRA. It was a CRA directed project, which is the city.
Okay, so I think that when we talk about affordable housing, that could be a good point of reference, because I can tell you that there's nothing affordable about the hardwood. The cheapest house is almost $300,000 to buy. So just wondering, how do you guys go about getting your data and figuring out what really is affordable housing, and who are you trying to target? Because even a family with, 2 people working and having a decent income cannot afford to buy a $300,000 home.
So, and I won't speak for Heartwood. I know that some of the units had an affordability. I also know that they are looking for some of the units to be market rate, and there's been a push in the community to have more market rate housing. So to not specifically have a government hand on the till trying to make it subsidize it to make it more affordable. And the county is involved actually on a piece of property right next door to Heartwood, doing something similar. So we have a request for proposals for developers to come in who want to build primarily, once again, detached housing, or maybe some different types of housing, and maybe some mix of uses, but primarily housing right next door to Heartwood. Like I said, it's really, it's one of these somewhat intractable problems. It's a nationwide issue where it is expensive to build housing, where the county is involved in terms of where we have policies that may drive up the cost of housing. So regulations that require you to do certain things. That's one of the things we're looking to do, is remove those so that it's less expensive to build housing and therefore hopefully less expensive to buy housing. But ultimately it's a housing market. So everyone is reacting in the market, and that's one of the things I see potentially in Parkway as well.
So my thoughts are, instead of, and you want both, there's a huge wealth gap. And my thoughts are that as you're trying to build something that I can afford, remove barriers that stand in the way of me building wealth. And I think that, and my belief is that government can do what government wants to do. That when we're talking about the East Side, if we incentivize employers to come over to the East Side, say we had a 400 and a place that had 400 employees or 800 employees, I think housing and development will follow that. I think sometimes we put the cart in front of the horse. People are working all the way on the other side of town, and we're trying to bring development. But I think developers are going to get near. People want to live near their work, their job, and I think if there's a way that we can incentivize major employers to come to the east side of town, and then what that does when the development comes, now my home, the value is increased. I got to pay more taxes, but the value of my home is increased. And so if the beginning of my wealth building is in my home, but there's not development that pulls me up, you're really affecting my ability to play a role in closing the wealth gap. And so I think that we really have to look at ways to attract employers that developers will follow. And then in the end, it will increase. I had 2 homes over on the east, one northwest, one in southwest, and one in northeast, 3 homes. And when I look at the value, that's the increase in value of my home in northeast, it doesn't even compare to the northwest and the southwest. And so I think that's a tool that's been used against us. Somebody mentioned it earlier. That's a tool that's been used against us. We make excuses about what we can't do. We put people in a certain area, and then we create barriers so that their first tool to build wealth, that wealth doesn't increase. And the value of their homes does not increase in the same way that values of homes on the other side of town. So I think we got to find a way to incentivize major employers to come on this side, and I think the other stuff will follow. Yes, ma'am. There you go.
Mr. Rawls, that was really well said, because the correlation between the achievement gap and the income disparity is just right there, you know. And so the median income that qualified for affordable housing prior to this change was $80,000 a year. And so, you know, a developer is going to come in, and that means a 2-bedroom that's $1,500 a month, a 1-bedroom that's $1,200 a month, and you qualify for affordable housing. So I'm really curious to hear how the inclusionary housing study might address that.
So primarily, it is looking to make sure that we have housing that's available at 80% of the adjusted median income for family. So that's where it's targeted right now.
It's so high, so high.
I will say, and you know, inclusionary housing is one of those policies. It's sort of threading a needle to make sure that we get the development that will produce the units. And so finding that right level of inclusionary provision is a little bit difficult and fluid market. But that is what we're trying to do.
Good. We have about 15 more minutes. But Dr. Houchin really needs some of y'all to eat some of that food over there. And so y'all go fix your plate and come back and sit down. But we need y'all to chew on that food. There's hand sanitizer over there also in the window. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Pastor Rawls. You mentioned something just now that I wanted to ask about building wealth. Well, so we see that enterprise zone sign on, I see our opportunity zone. does that mean, did that piece of property get the same designation the way that properties receive the enterprise zone? Zoning, because back, like, when I worked at GRU, the city kind of petitioned and they had this area that was in the enterprise zone, and it was an area that was considered, I hate to say it, but blighted. And old buildings, old vacant buildings is what the statute, I'm calling it, saying, high unemployment, or low skill and low wage. So to me, that doesn't, it sounds appealing to say this property is an enterprise zone because it did give at that time 50% discount on permits and city utility taxes and things like that, like utility. But is that going to attract the desirable development that the residents of East Gainesville are wanting? So my question is an enterprise zone, some opportunity zone similar to the classification for enterprise zone?
That is a great question, and there is a designation called an opportunity zone that is separate from the enterprise zone. I'm not quite the expert on the differentiation between the two, except to say that I did understand that the benefits that the enterprise zone did provide. So I don't have a great answer to that one. I mean, the idea between either of those types of programs is to decrease the cost of development, or to provide, especially if it's a for-profit private business, to decrease the cost, so they're more likely to come into that area versus another area.
So in the comp plan, you all don't have like mapped out where opportunity zones are, and because this is considered the unincorporated area. Southeast 43rd Street, and there's that piece of property. So that's not on the comp plans.
So the only incentives that we have currently are the ones that mentioned, which is basically the entire eastern portion of our urban cluster. So it would be included in that. So it's everything east of the city of Gainesville, but west of Noonan's Lake. And so it would be included in that, and it's the incentives that I mentioned earlier, just about the reduction in permit fees and the decreased mobility fee.
So my question was the opportunity zone, that way that property, and it may, I'm asking, is that opportunity zone that's like, because I'm pointing over there because it's just to us, right? That's over there, but our properties that are considered part of the opportunity zone, are they on the comprehensive zone? I mean, map, so you all know where they are. The people in planning zone, we know where they are.
We do not have that map in our comprehensive plan. No.
Thank you.
My name is Dr. K. Shakur. My message to you, my question to you, sir, is, are you working with Black and minority developers?
So one of the things is we're basically, as the county department that I'm in, growth management is a regulatory body. So we work with whoever walks in the door. We do have, as I mentioned, an RFP that's actually looking specifically for it's for a development partner on a county-owned piece of property. And it's on the east side of the county. And I know that we have a local preference. I'm not sure what other preferences are involved in the procurement.
So I rephrase my question. You say you deal with who walks in through the door. How many Black developers have you worked with in the past, and how many are you currently working with?
I don't know the answer to that. We have had developers, all stripes, come through the door.
But that's a very generalized question. Since we're talking about the east side of town, which is primarily people of African American descent, primarily, it would seem like you would have a certain amount of number of Black developers that you've already worked with or have reached out to. The reason why I'm saying that, because usually, and I hate to put it like this, but sometimes people of the same persuasion will have more of an incentive to develop on the side of town where people like them live. Sometimes other developers might not have the same inner motivation unless gentrification takes place, which is what it looks like to me that I'm seeing here. It looks like, for me, it's like a rerun movie. I've seen it in Brooklyn. I've seen it in the town I'm from in Detroit. I've been here 15 years, and it looks like it's the same old movie again with different actors.
All right, if there's nothing else, I'm going to allow our board members to provide any kind of input. Any of our board? All right, any of our board members have anything you want to say?
I think we have to be very careful when we talk about affordable housing, that it doesn't mean crummy housing. And make sure that it's up to standards that would be anywhere. It's a fear I have.
All right, yes, ma'am.
Pastor Rawls, one of the things I'm still not clear on, and we had this discussion in one of our meetings about the area behind the church and behind East Side. I'd like to be clear about what area that we could have businesses. Everything in the back cannot be wetlands, right? Yeah? No? So I'm not clear about if there were some developers, whether they know where they can develop.
So yes, in fact, I've had meetings, I have had a meeting this week with a developer who's looking at a piece of property on Hawthorne Road east of here. We've had meetings in the last couple of months, someone looking at a piece on Hawthorne Road here in the activity center, just west of here. That are maybe partially have wetlands, but not completely wetland. They have developable property. Both of those are mixed use properties and they'll allow commercial and or residential development. And so basically everywhere within the activity center, which is everywhere you saw on that earlier map within the East Side Activity Center, is a mixed use piece of property. So it allows commercial, very light industrial, so not heavy polluting industrial, but manufacturing, fabrication. And then there's a lot of properties along Hawthorne Road that are also, traditionally have been commercial and remain commercial properties that could have any kind of commercial type of development.
One other, and then I'll turn it over to Yvette. I'd like to ask the audience, this mic is going in and I'll move it down. I'd like to ask the audience, because one of the things we've been concerned about, and Jerry mentioned it, was communications, notifications. We're very pleased to see the attendance tonight. We're actually shocked. So we're pleased that you are here, but we'd like to know, how did you hear about this event? If social media, was it the county's social media? Church announcement.
Yeah, because Mr. Rawls invited me on Facebook. Yeah. That's why I'm here. And I'm on the county's list. I'm an activist in town. I follow, but I showed up because Mr. Rawls here showed up. He's, come over here. When he says come, I come. So,
that's why we're here too, because he said come.
And the majority of us here because he invited us.
Okay, and someone said.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I don't know who sends out, there's a newsletter that said, comes out on Thursdays that says like what you're doing. It had a lot of things and this was it. No. Maybe it was in like the Main Street Daily News newsletter. It was a newsletter. It was like a local newsletter that I get, that I saw it out of town.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I neglected to introduce myself earlier, and I just wanted to go on record with that in case somebody wants to get in touch with me later. My name is Jyoti Parmar. My pronouns are she, they, and I work with Sierra Club, Florida. I'm their clean energy organizer, and I do environmental justice. And if anybody would like to get in touch at any point, you can find me on the website. And I have my cards here. So please reach out. We'd like to work together. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was trying to hurry up and get the mic because I knew she was going to steal my member comments, but I'm going to say them again because they're worth repeating. Well, I'll start with this. I think I I thought I understood the enterprise zone, opportunity zone, and activity center before I came tonight. I thought I did. I think I'm going to be reaching out to county staff for clear expectation or clear understanding of what it is, because I think I got a little discombobulated tonight because some of the terms feel interchangeable. But what I do want to put on the record is what I heard tonight is there are no enterprise zones in the county nor in the city. But there are no, but we are doing county. I'm not here on behalf of the city of Gainesville tonight. But there are no enterprise zones in the county. There are activity centers in the county. I'm looking for a head nod, and I kind of hear it, then or see it. Secondly, I want to give huge kudos to Mr. Hayes. You did the whole thing by yourself. You are the man in my book, because somebody could have tagged out for you, but they did not. So you won the prize and an extra piece of chicken for you, sir. The third thing I would like to say is proactive communication and marketing, not only of these listening sessions, but all things county related is what I hear that we need more of as part of equity and more than social media. I have a 90-year-old aunt, Zola Mae Johnson. I mention her every opportunity I get. She will never be on Facebook. She will never receive a text message. She does check her mail, but depending on what it is, she may not open it. So we need to really be mindful that even though it's 2025, we have more generations now than we've ever had before, and we want to be equitable for folks of different ages that have different means of communication and social economic status. So I think those are my comments for now, Mr. Chair, but I do also want to give a big shout out to everyone who came out tonight. I've heard in the last couple of days that people didn't know about it, and I personally got yelled at. I'm like, whoa. So I do believe the county will be doing more ways in the future to be equitable about how we get out, how the county gets out, not only equity advisory board meetings and sessions, but all things. There are many different ways to do that. But thank you all for coming out tonight, thinking it not robbery to be here, because it's important for us, this board, to hear from you. We didn't want to move forward with anything without hearing from you. Oh, would you all mind, before we leave tonight, doesn't have to be now, we have one other board member to give comments. Would you, staff, could we see the county staff that did come out tonight to support this meeting, this effort at some point? Is that all right, Gina? Am I out of order to ask for it now, or should we wait for the end?
Y'all stand up for it.
Yeah. I'll start. Oh man, that take our community number down. Some of y'all sit down.
So what I think would be helpful in the future is a clear delineation between city and county and who's over what. I saw a lot of terms being interchangeable, like in reference, but I think it'll be helpful for the audience at large so that they know who's in charge of what and who to solicit. I would also like to see more data on the historical and systemic barriers that have impacted the East Side's economic development, and how will they be addressed by growth management strategies. I think that's also very important. And I would also like to know ways that the county has maximized efforts from like the Biden Infrastructure Act, which was passed to secure funding for modernizing infrastructure to stimulate economic development and advance equity. So it would be nice to see what ways the county has solicited funding from those buckets as well. And I think all communication efforts, again, we know about high level communication, need to come down to the ground level. Even communication back to the community at large. Be careful with terminology. That's all I like to say.
All right. I think we've heard from everyone. We meet the third Thursday of each month at the county building, 6:00 p.m. So it's a public meeting. You all are more than welcome to attend. And over the next few months, jot some things down that you noticed. And so we plan on within the next, we have 4 more departments to hear from. So after we've heard from those four departments, we plan on having another listening session. And so we thank you all for coming, but I still see too much chicken over there. So I sure we can't eat it. We on a plant-based fast right now. So y'all take all that chicken with you. But this meeting is now, if there are no further comments, Ms. Peoples, did you need to say anything? Okay, for the comments, this meeting is now adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Happy Founder's Day to the members of Zeta Phi Beta sorority.
Happy Founder's
Oh my God, she got a big old note up here. Happy Founders Day to the finer ladies of Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I knew that I thought. With equity, I think somewhere in there. Thanks. Yeah, we need a group.
Over here, chair. Over here.
Yeah.
Are y'all still going?
I'm gonna eat that.